Welcome to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris, featuring top business leaders sharing strategies and resources to get to the next level. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, I'm William Harris. I'm the founder and CEO of Element and the host of the Up Arrow Podcast, where I feature the best minds in e-commerce to help you scale from 10 million to 100 million and beyond as you up arrow your business and your personal life. Today's guest has been behind the curtain of some of the most explosive consumer brand launches of the last 2 decades, from Monster Energy and Kavita to Bushwick Kitchen, Honest Tea, and dozens more. If you've ever wondered how a scrappy CPG brand goes from "who's that" to a can't-miss shelf star without spending millions on paid ads, Matt Kovacs is the guy you call. He's the president of Blaze PR, a top-tier agency that's helped turn fledgling startups into cultural darlings, secured editorial love in every outlet that matters, and guided countless founders through the tricky terrain of scaling, storytelling, and earning attention the right way, not the gimmicky way. But here's what makes Matt different. He's not just a get-you-in-Forbes guy. He's a growth strategist in disguise, helping brands use PR to attract investment, shape category dynamics, and build reputations that actually convert. Today, we're going deep into the actual science of buzz. Matt Kovacs, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, and I do want to give a shout out to Dr. Jeremy Weiss over at Rise 25. He's the one who put us in touch. He's the one who actually produces my podcast. I don't know if I actually have ever mentioned that on the podcast before, but those who are wondering, that is who produces my podcast. And he always is connected to some of the best people. And when he sent your information over, I was like, yes, I've got to have this guy on.
I will send him the $5 after this this time.
Yeah. One quick announcement, then we're going to dive right in. I do want to announce our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Element. Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, we've helped 13 of our customers get acquired, with the largest one selling for nearly $800 million and one that IPO'd. You can learn more on our website at element.com, which is spelled ELUMYNT.com. That said, on to the good stuff. I want to talk about what great PR actually looks like. You know, the science and art of generating real momentum. And you have said before, something you told me, is that you help founders get the big spike. What does that mean?
I think, it really is interesting when we start with any campaign and with founders and et cetera, is what are their goals? And I think many times people don't ask that. They just say, okay, cool, we're going to hurry up and just send releases and pitches and get you interviewed and get your name out there. But it's really, are they looking for acquisition, funding? Is it just brand building? Are they looking for their next, their next big launch? So those are things that get them to think about a campaign. And I think that helps us in the start and then through our timelines to understand what types of media to go for. And I think from there, we build out that type of program. And then, yes, obviously getting them the interviews, regardless of those 3 choices, you want to start to get their name out there and start to build them as an expert, the thought leadership in ways that they're looking at their ecosystem and what different media would be interested in learning. I think the other thing that we try and do is understand beyond the CEO, the players within the company, because there's so many other opportunities.
Sure.
We audit the media for this, and we also audit the internal brand to understand what type of brands they've worked on, what type of stories they have, their perspective, because everyone, it may be in the same company, but they look at it very differently. And I think that's really what brings it to life for different media, because it's a way to grow, make the brand seem bigger, but grow that mind share overall.
There are 2 philosophical things that you just talked about that I really appreciate, because we share that at our company. One is finding out what their actual goal is ahead of time. From an advertising perspective, we still believe that's important too, because if you're actually actively trying to raise a Series B, or if you're trying to get acquired, or if you're trying to just, gain market penetration with a new line, those all have some significant differences in what type of metrics we're actually going to be optimizing towards. And so knowing those goals does help guide the right strategy. And the other thing that you said that I really appreciate is getting involvement in from other people in the team. I like where you went at that from the PR standpoint. Again, on the advertising side, we bring in for, some of the brainstorms, we're bringing in people from customer service and people from other departments, because that's going to allow us to have a deeper insight into who their customers are. And so I love that you have this more integrated approach.
It also gives more buy-in, because there's always the one person in the company that wasn't included, and they chirp about, well, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. And you get them involved at a level that they understand. And if anything, it gets them to support it and then be able to be a little mouthpiece out into the field, be it in the sales teams, if it's in the manufacturing facility, wherever it is. The more people you can touch to understand what you're doing is going to help in the long run.
How would you describe great PR?
I think great PR really does a number of things. I think one, it helps to build that brand awareness and that stickiness. It makes the buy-in from a consumer to understand it. And I think the third thing we look at is the great PR begets more PR. Is when you start to get the media to understand and come and ask, and when you reach out to them, they're like, yes, I've heard about it, I've read it, you've sent me stuff like that. You start to get that muscle memory for them, and I think that's an important factor. A lot of it is, in the past we used to say, oh, media are lazy. They don't want to, they want to be spoon fed. Now it's the opposite, where they're overworked. There's less, a lot of the newspapers, it's either freelancers or someone that has 5 different beats. So you want to try and help them, but you also want to show that these are true newsworthy stories. There's things happening. There's ways to build these cases so that they come to say, yes, I need to talk to this person. It is relevant. Help me help you.
It reminds me of word of mouth in general. When you think about, let's just say, influencing your customer. And so you're able to reach your customer and you win them over and they tell 5 of their friends, and it's a really good thing. But if you're doing this on the PR side of things, if they tell their 5 friends each have an audience of 500,000 people. And so this is a big amplifying opportunity.
Totally. And I think the other thing is really a lot of the key journalists understand that. And when they start to speak, and there are some agencies that will say, oh, we'll get you in Forbes. And you touched on that earlier. But that's only one part of it, because that's you're reaching a certain audience that is going to be into Forbes. You really have to understand what the audiences can do for the brand. So if it is, you want to reach moms, if you want to reach retailers and buyers, like if we need to own the trades for the first quarter of this program, as brands look at it. And I think especially when it's the D2C market, understanding the other people you can touch that'll help them to be able to find maybe partnerships, other types of aspects, influencers that can have a part of this type of journey. And I think that's a part of that element where the campaign, that banging that drum really needs to go louder and louder from a ripple standpoint.
I like that you brought up trade media, because you and I have talked about trade media, consumer media. And there was one thing you said that I hadn't considered before, is that beverage brands do better with the trade and consumer media than supplement brands. Why?
It's interesting. I think, through the years, I think that beverage media trades really have a respect, and they shepherd the beverage brands through. They really look, if it's a startup we've brought through, Kavita is a great story. Kavita was in the kitchen, the Bill Moses and Chakra, created this brand, and the media generated that you're creating a whole new category. And you were able to create opportunities and, obviously trial and all those aspects. But everyone rallied behind it and was able to create this narrative beside it of this, probiotic sparkling drink and the flavors and the profile and all those aspects. Supplements, when we pitch our supplement clients, there's always that, the raised eyebrow, the question mark. Everyone's trying to knock it down. Do you have scientific studies, white papers? Which again, is not a bad thing, because you want to make sure the efficacy, everything's correct. But I think that they come in very skeptical, because a lot of the supplements, especially with Amazon, there's so many supplements up there that just someone, in their garage has, a pill case thing, just making supplements. And I think that, rightly so, they do it, but it's not as welcoming as the beverage media. The beverage media wants to learn and do more. And we just launched a brand here in the US called Wrecked Drinks. It came from more of the Web 3.0, crypto world, that they created a true product, and their goal was to, let's go. Beverages are much more, all-encompassing for consumers, and it was the beverage media was like, that's different, that's weird. It's like, let me get into that, because if you're not into crypto, you're going to say, okay, I don't get it, or you think it's the the Wolf of Wall Street boys or any of that stuff. So it's interesting how beverage media looks at it versus the way that supplement media has just a different eye, and that's the only way we can sort of break it down.
And that's fair. I think it's fair to have a different eye in those two. Like, I can see it maybe logically, or at least anecdotally, that beverages don't necessarily have to be good for you, even though some of them might be claiming that they are. They don't necessarily have to be, right? We've got plenty of pop stuff like that. For the most part, supplement is meant to have this intended effect, and so it has to be looked at a little bit more, intensely.
Yeah, and the claims, I mean, again, that's part of it too, is if, we come in with these claims that it's going to make you stronger, faster, all those elements. But it's also, we try and build, in that case, we're also building the background of the chief scientific officer, the CEOs, why they're in this industry. where again, a lot of those Amazon supplement brands are not going to have that backstory. They're just looking to move product, and we're trying to help build a brand.
Yeah, I like that. Something that Clayton Christopher told me, he was the founder of Waterloo Sparkling Water, and a few other brands, right? Is that it all comes down to taste. That if it doesn't taste good, it doesn't really matter. Any of the other things that you're doing, at some point in time, people just have to get liquid to lips is the term that he used.
Yeah. Yep.
Do a lot of the activations with, let's just say, beverage brands, but even moving outside of beverage brands, is there almost always some type of get the product in the hands of the people?
Yeah, I think that's our number one influencer strategy, is to really get product out there, because you want to have these advocates, this army of people that are not only creating the content, but they like the product, they believe in it, they actually enjoy the flavors, and that's a lot of the work we do, is to understand within that profiles of each influencer, which ones, some can't do caffeine, some can't. If we have any of the the natural caffeines or any of the natural ones. So it's really understanding that to be as efficient as you can. And I think the other thing is, when you look at it from taste and flavor, there's so many different profiles now, and different, guava this, and different aspects that they have from previous experiences. They'll have preconceived notions of, oh, I don't like guava. And you're like, but no, have you tried this one? Go down that path. And a lot of times, they'll give it that chance, because I think it is interesting for them. And they also, there's many times they don't have that fear of missing out. That, hey, everyone else, all the other, thousands of influencers got the product, I didn't, and it's taking off as like the next big thing.
It's so powerful, the fear of missing out. When the David protein bars were going around there, it felt like everybody in D2C was talking about them. Like, not even like your normal influencers, but like the D2C SaaS influencers all somehow had these David protein bars and were talking about it as well.
Totally.
When I think about what a product needs to be media ready, what would you say makes a product you're like, yes, you're ready to take this to the PR level?
I think there's a couple of things we look at is, and it's interesting, because as people start this journey, they're already in their mindset of, it's at the Amazon facility, it's at, these places. We talk about, you need to have product ready for us to send out, because media will be interested, they'll talk about it, but until, back to that original point, lips, the liquid to lips, or just product in trial, that's the way that media really can understand it, because there is so much more product going out to them, that's a big factor. And a lot of times it's not baked into the budgets, or baked into, okay, oh, we hired the agency, oh, we got to send product out, or we have to get trial that way. And then, a lot of times you get into operational issues of, well, we only we only create cases, and we're not going to send a whole case to someone. We want, and again, it's better to send four. Because what's funny, when you send to influencers in New York, the last thing someone living in a high rise or an apartment wants to have to carry 2 cases of steps. And so there's ways to be more feasible that way. So we try and help them with either houses that can do that, different shipment places. Well, our interns get to do fun shipment mailer type things. But those things, again, they're tactical and they're tiny, but they add up, because that limits coverage, that limits aspects. And then I think the other thing is understanding feedback, because the last thing, this is your baby, you've launched it. Reporter X might say, I love, love Blaze, love what you do. I'm not going to write about it because I didn't like it. And then you give that feedback back to the, the brand, and they're like, well, why? But this was our best tested. This was, this, and this. And it's interesting, that dichotomy of getting that information back. And we start with our programs doing a media audit, where we really interview reporters. We have a list of questions. We want to understand how they like to be, introduced to this brand, giving just some of that perspective, because they're the gatekeepers of information. They're being pitched and spammed all the time. So it's a way that from a baseline standpoint, we can go back to the brand and say, okay, here's where we are from a reporter standpoint. You try and get like 20 or 30 as a good sort of baseline to understand overall. And then there's a good discussion around it. And then they understand we're sending product out, pitches, releases, that there is a longer journey. There's not just people waiting there, pen in hand to write a story.
Right.
There's that selling aspect that happens as well.
Yeah. I actually never even thought about this idea of walking up a flight of stairs, or several flights of stairs with that.
I've gotten yelled at many times from a reporter of like, why did you send me 3 cases? Yeah.
It's so nuanced, but it's like, if I was going to just go out there and do this, I wouldn't know that, because I haven't done it before. And it's interesting. I mean, I remember having when I first got some weights, because I don't have flights of stairs to go up, and so I shipped out some weights, and it's like 300 pounds of weights or something, and it's like the poor person taking this off the truck. No big deal though, because I can just take it over to my my barn here, our garage, whatever, very easily. But I can imagine if I had to take that up 3 flights of stairs, I would be a little bit disappointed.
And then that hurts the experience for your review. It's like, yes, do I even want this now? I brought it up, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You started hinting at this already a little bit about like how you guys approach some of these campaigns, but what does a successful campaign actually look like for the first 90 days?
Yeah, I think what we look at in that 90 days, because it really is, again, as everything, time is shrinking. We want to make sure within those first 30 days, we have all our, obviously, the ducks in a row, the press releases, the pitches, the boilerplates, the bios, etc. But also, we're starting to tease out to media right away. Hey, we're working with this brand. It's sort of a whisper campaign of, hey, we're working with them. We're going to get you information. If you're working on any current stories, this might be applicable, and here's why. And then, the goal, we always challenge ourselves within those first couple of weeks to try and get, media interested, so that you're getting back to their client and saying, hey, this person X wants to talk to you, wants to put you on a podcast, etc. What it does, I think, there's strategically for us, we're showing results quickly. It is all about the results. But also it puts the client on not a defensive standpoint, but like, oh, this is real now. Like it helps to get that mindset of like, oh, people want to talk to us. I can't. It's not a transactional thing that you guys take this over now. It's now the relationship, and I think that's really helped us as well, because then it's setting the right tone for everyone to have understanding of now you have an agency, and now this happens, and now you have to bake that time into it, and it's really helped us from that direction to start on the right foot.
You talked about this whisper campaign, and that's a word that I've heard before, but like when I hear you say it like this, it makes me think, is it better to get it in the hands of, let's just say, some like these bigger writers as a whisper campaign, or like before you've gone to influencers, or is it better to get a little bit of like influencer leverage first before you bring it to them? Do you want to have some traction first?
I think each case is different. And sure. I think the other thing is, depending on the goals, again, if it's more about brand building, influencers can get you going faster because they're waiting, they can do stuff. Sure. There's a little bit of both, because the trades take sometimes a little bit longer, depending on what they're working on and their editorial calendars and the time of year, depending on which trade shows are going on. So there's ways to look at it, but from a nuanced standpoint of ways to element. The other thing is, you could do the whisper to the traditional media, but at the same time have the influencer start posting. Because then as you're getting the dialogue going, you can say, well, look, this person down the street from you is already posting about it, so you can see it's happening. So that it doesn't feel like they have to be the first ones to cross the finish line and write about it. They can say, okay, it's a thing, it's happening. And I think that's an important factor with it as well. And that's where you have those relationships with influencers that sometimes you get to move to the front of the line and say, hey, do you think you can post about this soon? Those types of things. And it's really a way, I think, that as the influencers have gotten more credibility, and their numbers grow, and with TikTok and all those aspects, we've treated them just like media probably from day one. I mean, they get invited to events. They get cool. There's not like the cool kit for media and then like the average kit for influencers. It's really been that type of embracing what they do and respecting and honoring that. I think that's helped us.
Yeah, they are a version of the media, right? To a point.
100%. Yeah.
How about you talked about helping founders get on Forbes, or just becoming thought leaders in general. And I think that there's a lot of importance. From a SaaS background, that was something that we focused on a lot. For some reason, that was just in my mind. Never thought about it from CPG. It's like I thought that was more product focused. But like, what are the ways that you're helping founders become thought leaders, and why? Why is it important, even of CPG brands, for the founders to be at the forefront of this?
I think it's been a trend for a few years that the founders have this sixth sense about what the consumers want. I mean, you go back to Steve Jobs in the iPad. That the consumer doesn't need it, but they're going to want it, and it's that same thing when you look at it, especially with what we've gone through over the past 5 years, be it supply chain and now tariffs and all those aspects. These are people that are more on the front lines, and the founders can speak to it in a different way. And so much of it now, it's not just about one category. It could be a whole subsect of just natural foods, natural products. And I think that the Forbes reporters that are out there covering it are looking for those next level, Seth Goldman's from Honest Tea and those aspects, because they look at it from a different lens. they're out there with ingredient suppliers, and they're looking at it from the retailer and buyer issues, and they have a different handle on it, I think, than transitional things, as well as all the things going on out at retail. The mergers happening, with Kroger and Albertsons, that almost happened. You have all these things that they have so many different hurdles they go through, that giving them that platform, be it Forbes, Inc., Business Insider, for them to be able to tell that story, I think is really relevant for, businesses that look outside that world. And, I think that's become a big factor. And then it helps, the traditional media and the trades look at it like, okay, cool, you're in Forbes now. Like that does become sort of a badge. And I think that's something they like to, hang their hat on.
There are some potential downsides to founders being too much at the forefront too, right? Like if a founder ends up doing the wrong thing, that's a downside. But I would even say just like the decoupling of them as a human being when post-acquisition. It's something that I've run into with a lot of founders. We've helped a lot of founders get acquired. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's not unlike, when people say, why don't you work with celebrities or athletes? And that's one of the first things we say, is because you're dealing with the human element. You look, they get a DUI, other, criminal things happen, or even just, a wrong tweet, these days that happens. So I think the transition of the, CEO as the face and the voice, it does start to back off when the product starts to get traction and it starts to have aspects. And that's part of that original meeting where you're bringing in the whole team and the whole, not even just the marketing departments, but other aspects, because there's opportunity to speak to operations, to speak to manufacturing, so that we can have a broader base. The founder, CEO, et cetera, is still going to be at the forefront for, the larger opportunities. But then we do start to pull the levers and have different, aspects. And there's sometimes where it's just product focused. Product is the hero. We're going to go, all into this, leading up to a trade show or leading up to an event. And then that's the way that then when the founder comes, there's not this fatigue of like, I've been reading about you for 5 months. Why do I want to talk to you again? You really have to balance that in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That fatigue can set in for anything. And so having different stories, like you said, not just the founder, but different people within the team, the product itself, gives you
and
a lot
on both
things.
sides too. I think there's fatigue on the founder.
Sure.
Like having Groundhog Day, telling the same story, 100 times. But it does help, again, to give it a breather, have other people come forward, and it energizes the story.
Yeah, buddy of mine was in a pretty big band. I want to say they did, anywhere between 100, 300 shows a year. And that was something that he mentioned, is that it's like, to you, you're very excited to hear that song that they've played 800 million times, and to them, sometimes it's the same song. And it's like, all right, we got to do this song again. Everybody wants this song. And so I can see that. I want to start working through helping D2C founders overcome their skepticism of PR. When we talk to a lot of D2C owners, one of the things that they struggle with is they're very quick to spend money on ads, but then they worry a little bit about PR. Part of that is because I think they come from a performance background. They're looking at MER, they're looking at ROAS. How do you explain the ROI of PR to somebody who's so used to looking at a meta dashboard?
I think there's a couple things. I think the first thing is there are so many more services now that will give us data that we can then share with founders as well, and again, executives, et cetera, to say, here's what the reach and the impressions and the value is of coverage. So you go it that way, and it's not an exact science, because it does get passed around. The numbers are the numbers, but you look at it that way. We try and do some of the comparables to different, be it CPM or the ad, looking at it from that. And again, it's not exact, but it's a way for PR to at least speak in that language. The other thing is, we try and tell the story of just the third-party validation and the brand building, and then having these other, we'll say army or disciples of people with your brand, that's how you're going to really get it authentically. Because you can say you're great, to your point, run the ads, you can do all those things. But if you have someone else saying, try this, I liked it, they try, it's the trust factor. That's where the influencers come in. And then the other thing we do is, it's called like an impact index, but it's a way, we live in a 5-star society. It's a way to really teach at the very beginning, okay, what are the 5 things you want to see in a placement? Is it, the call to action, the backlinks, a photo, a quote, whatever those are, and then we can rate every piece of coverage. And it's a way that you're setting it that, okay, this was a 4-star piece of coverage. Here's our monthly average is a 4.2. Like there's ways that you're using data to quantify the PR, in a qualitative way that gets them, in that. So it's not that it's like voodoo math or, any of that, but we're trying to merge the art and science together so that, to your point, they stare at numbers all day and they can look at it. And then also it gives us the factor, if a piece of coverage comes out and it's like a lot of ones and twos, that helps us to say, okay, the messaging's not working. When your interviews, you've been tanking, and this proves that you've tanked
Sure.
your interview, and that, we need to maybe do some more media training or do some more elements. So it's a way to really gauge and guide this in a way that helps everyone. Because it's not like a published, oh my God, that was a 2.8 interview, but it's a way that it just gives it back to the point of baselines and level setting. It's a way that we try and do that and give those numbers.
Media training is such an interesting thing. I remember seeing some, I think it's like Charisma on Demand or something like that, has some really good stuff on YouTube, and seeing some early examples of The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, in some of his interviews. And it was like, wow, that was legitimately bad. Like, you should not be in front of a camera, to where he is now. And he's very charismatic. He's able to take this into stories and tangents and do a good job. And I can imagine that when you're working with, a very technical founder, there are a lot of moments where you're just like, I need to get you behind here, but we need to do a little work here. How do you go about getting founders trained up to really be media ready?
I think so. We have a media training program, but I also think we try and say, and sometimes it can be harsh, but like, pretend you're talking to a human. Like, think outside of your bounds. And these can't be the soundbite answers are great, but it can't be so technical and inside baseball that the person on the other side doesn't understand it. And a good example would be, the brands that come in and they get so wrapped up in what their brand is that it's hard for them to articulate, because that excitement comes through, which is great. One of the things we always talk about is you have to be excited about your product.
100%.
We go through that we have a whole program we go through, and then we film on camera experiences, and then back to the point of all the shareholders, all the other people in the room, we have them grade the interviews, the role play. And so it's a way that you're having, your team is a part of it. You're experiencing it together. It's not just one-on-one media training. It's really messaging training for the whole organization of people that could be potential spokespeople, and not spokespeople per se for media, but the head of sales is going to be talking to a buyer and a retailer. So you want to have that same voice there, as that if someone read the article, that things match. It's not that the buyer's saying, we're this, and the CEO says that, and marketing's, sending out ads and messages. That's the third thing. We try to unify that in a way. And then we do it on a quarterly basis. There's refreshes, there's, hey, let's watch this interview together. Let's see, what we saw. Some things it takes time, just from an overall messaging standpoint, and especially when founders maybe aren't used to speaking in front of, be it cameras or media, that often. So I think that's an element of that media training every time is, here's what we saw and didn't see. We obviously send along, here's the coverage wrap, here's the impressions, the value, the impact index, but also here's some things to work on. There's some, more constant trying to get them to understand it, but not at the point of them being annoyed. It's that another balance where you have to go, okay, criticism's good to a certain point.
Yeah, in fairness, Steve Jobs maybe wasn't the right person at first, but he developed into the right person with time, right? And you kind of figured that out.
Yeah.
So there are ways that you're able to, like you said, somewhat sort of quantify the quality of the PR and what's taking place. I would say that one of the things that we're looking for on our side are increases in brand searches, and so not just on organic brand searches, but brand searches that we're seeing showing up in the paid side of things. But then we're also seeing just an increase in conversion rate in general, right? As a result of that, there are more people that are now primed and ready to buy, that all of a sudden your prospecting campaigns on Facebook and Meta might be performing better as a result of that. And so you have to look at it and say, was it necessarily a change that you did within the Meta platform, or is it because of the PR that you're doing and they're just coupling together and working well together? And I think a lot of people sometimes maybe miss those aspects of that secondary effect.
Well, I think too, now you layer in the AI search and how everyone's starting to migrate over there. And that's where the PR aspects, because it's faster. It's going to get more information. You're not going through all the ads and through all the other, gobbledygook that's there now. And that's what we try and aim to explain as well, of like, these have to be, your interviews have to be that much tighter. The written Q&As have to have a lot of the keywords. There's ways that it's going to help overall. And you're seeing that change. And I think it's from the PR training of how to just sort of change the messaging, and then externally with clients so they understand it. And even we've done, quick, Zooms to show clients how this stuff works now. Because some of them are so, again, they're lost in their sauce, which is great, but we need to show and navigate what's happening out there in the real world for them to understand.
I love that you call it AI searches, because if we think about the breakdown of how AI searches work, right, it's basically saying this is what it expects to be the next word after the thing that it just did. And the way that it has more relevancy of seeing your word, your brand be the thing that it thinks is next to follow within this is for there to be more instances of that within its training. The way that you get more instances of that within its training is through PR. PR, I think, is one of the best things that you can do. Good PR then is going to lead towards, let's just even say, more of your articles, your brand name showing up at the top of different articles on Google search. And so when it starts doing its research and deep research and it finds you, it means that people are potentially talking about you more in Reddit, because by being exposed out in the world, you're going to have people talking both negatively and positively about you. That means that they're going to forums, they're going to be talking about you more. That conversation is something that AI relies on heavily. And so by simply having more exposure, more opportunities out there outside of advertising, that creates a lot more opportunity for AI searches to show you.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen in a number of those ways, especially when if there's a negative connotation or negative elements around the brand, ways to counteract that, to almost call it out. Is this bad for you? Here's why, here's why this brand is not bad for you. To answer the question that, and then the AI sort of gets tripped up in that, but it's in a good way, because then you're able to tell that narrative in the right path. And then we make sure that those aspects, and back to your point, that what is the next words, that comes out in, be it press releases or interviews or ways that we can affect that. It's been interesting. We've gone through, I was talking this morning with a client. We've gone through knowing the reporter's first name and sitting with them and having a drink, to the bloggers, vloggers, influencers, and now AI. So we're pitching everything.
Yeah, no, that's good. It is, coming all the way around. Where do you draw the line between brand gut and marketing data?
I think more and more it's on the data side. I think the gut can only get you so far, and I think the data these days you really need it in a number of levels. And I think that that's where, when you look at it from, what we try and do as well is have sales in a lot of our meetings and a lot of our updates and a lot of our things, because sales has so much of that data, that consumer data, shopper data, that the marketing can be that gut and look, and I like this, but the sales data is going to tell us the real story and which products work, which people, what people gravitate toward flavor wise. And again, new flavors come out all the time, but like, where are we going to double down? Where are we going to look at it that way? And I think the data has been something, that's why we've incorporated so much more data into our recaps and stories and aspects, because then we're at least we're at the table speaking the right language, versus just, no, this is great. Look how big this was in the paper. But is it, do people read the paper anymore? Who's your audience? All those aspects. But I think the data can really help us in a number of ways. And there's media that want to get data, and obviously clients, obviously, but customers, brands don't want to share sales data, don't want to share a lot of the elements. But if we can share trends, if we can share aspects in that regard, that's data that's invaluable for a reporter. That helps us to garner more coverage, because they're coming from a factual standpoint, not just the brand thinks that grape is going to be the trend next year. It's more about, here's why, here's the new trends, here's why guava is taking off, or the new why spicy honeys and spicy things are happening, because of the trends with the data to back it up.
Do you end up doing some of this like behind the door type of PR work? And I'll explain what I mean by that. There was a company that I worked with called Sellbrite, and it was a SaaS company for optimizing listings and inventory management for Amazon. And one of the things that we wanted to rank for was just Amazon, like the term of Amazon, because we could rank for people that are, Amazon listings, things like that. Rather than putting together a fluffy PR piece, whatever, we put together a really good infographic about how Amazon makes its money. And then because of that, it was a lot easier to get into some of the PR outlets. I mean, I think we got linked to by Wall Street Journal, because it was an infographic breaking down the ways that Amazon makes its money. That's a very indirect thing. We don't deal with how Amazon makes its money. We're dealing with Amazon listings, but we wanted to rank higher for some of these Amazon terms. And so that allowed us to get some of this relevancy from an SEO standpoint. Is that still a play or not really?
I think what we try and do, I'd say yes, but we do a lot of qualitative and quantitative research. So we do a lot of surveys, we do a lot of data gathering, trying to
Sure.
find out in those trends around, here's packaging trends. Would you rather have one that's, compostable, or do you care about plastic? The whole world's, talking about it, or media-wise, of everything needs to be compostable and recyclable. But customers are telling us the opposite, because they just want convenience, price. They want to see the product. They don't want it hidden in this aspect. So
Sure.
ways we look at it. So we have data to say, look, here's the moms that are the shoppers, 25 to 35, living in the Pacific Northwest. Here's what they said. We did a survey, and it's tied back to the brand. So you're looking at it where it's been more evolved. There used to be smaller like surveys you would do that would get in the USA Today, infographic and talk about it that way. But really being able to have data that way. And there's so many easier programs now, over just cell phones, getting text, yes or no. And you get that, and you're able to get information really quickly to be able to then tell a story. And it's stuff that we also share. We try and do it with clients. That's why the sales team's in. Hey, if we got data we could get, would that help you in your sales meeting? Yes. So, okay, let's go down what we need to do. That data can then be parsed out. We can do a PR story around it. We can save it for an interview that the client can then share with the reporter. Or, again, the sales team can then use it to be able to say, "Here, we did a survey, we did an informed survey with different customers. And then we can give them all the back end data of who we spoke to, the timing, all those aspects." So those are important factors versus back to the point of can't just be gut. So all those aspects have to have some sort of data.
I love that. I want to dig into some real examples of some of the stuff that you've done, because you've done some really impressive stuff, and I want to be able to learn from that. Let's start with Bushwick Kitchen. How did PR help turn Hot Honey into an acquisition-ready brand?
Yeah, I think a lot of timing is everything, obviously. And I think we started with them right before COVID. So when you looked at it from, telling those stories, and they had just started to come out with actual gift packs. So you would get the hot honey, the sriracha, and the spicy maple. So telling that story was interesting and fun, and being able to get in the, CNN's, Christmas lists and all those aspects. But then when everyone, was hunkered down and stuck at home, and everyone became a home chef, those types of sauces and flavors and international flavors started to come more to the forefront. So we were able to ride that wave and really tell deeper stories. And then you saw just flavor profiles, and people wanted to try different things. I think that's where hot honey has become such a crazy just steamroller that hasn't stopped. I mean, you're seeing it everywhere. And the other thing is the sriracha spike, and then the shortages. Now, again, the shortages happened. Bushwick was still chugging along and be able to say, hey, over here, we have plenty of it. So we were able to capitalize that way and be able to speak to it, and then start to educate media of why is there a shortage? It's crazy that you'd have one specific sauce would be, shortage. So those are aspects we did from a strategic standpoint to be able to grow for them. And then the other thing was start to create more partnerships. So looking for opportunities for them, not only at like the street level. So there's a couple of like bakeries in Brooklyn that started to use their hot honey. Then we had more of like some of the pizza chains that were super regional. Now we're doing a partnership with Santa Monica Brew Works, where they're going to have a hot honey blonde ale. So it's funny that you look at it, and it's not that it's become just the buzzword, but there's the quality behind it, and the fact that it measures up, and that they've won a number of awards with it, which is always important in that category. And then for them to get back to D2C brands, it's just great content for them to be able to share and tout and send out. 5-time gold winner in this contest, and they're winning. They're going up against some big brands. And then you look at what other Truff and all the other sort of sauce and hot brands that have come out. It just sort of lifts the category, and people are looking for differences. And they have a fun bottle packaging, the way they present it, the way it's delivered versus other brands. It all sort of lends itself together. And I think that's the way we were able to really categorize that and carry it through.
I like that you talk about lifting up the category. How much do you think hot honey would have taken off if you hadn't done the PR for Bushwick Kitchens? Like, did you create the category, more or less?
No, I think what's funny, to your point, I think there's just was the influx of everything from Mike's, from all these brands that came up. And some of it became regionalized, and you heard about it in different areas. And I think that it just became a flavor profile that was of interest and differentiator.
Yeah. I love brand collaborations. I had Andy Heddle on here as well. He's now the head of Winnebago, but before he was doing a lot of brand collaborations. And this idea of getting, again, going back to liquid to lips, just this idea of flavor by getting the honey into like pizza shops. People are now trying the hot honey by getting it to the, I think you pale ale. I forget what kind of beer you said, right? But it's like to getting it to be a part of a beer and all these different things. It gives people the opportunity to get exposure to potentially a flavor that they're now creating demand for. How do you go about figuring out what are the right collaborations for a brand versus the wrong ones?
So for collaboration standpoint, it's interesting because if you look at food trends now, it's all about collabs and Frankenfoods and all these over-the-top foods. And a number of our brands are looking for more of those like-minded. They want to have quality, they want to have taste, flavor profiles, things that really match. And I think that's the way we really look at it. And the other thing that I don't think is taken into account as much is the values, the brand values. Mm-hmm. We look at it, for Bushwick, they have a very true, they know their true north, they know what they're about, they're wholesome people, salt of the earth. So when we have potential calls and we make introductions, you can tell if it's going to work or not. If the other brand is like, we like to do these, we get in and out, we're just going to sell it and it helps us, overall. That's not how Bushwick likes to work. It's much more of a deeper, honest level in that way. And I think those are things you can sort of understand. That's back to gut of that aspect of knowing, it's just not going to work well because they're going to be moving, 10,000 miles an hour. They're going to move slower. They're not going to be able to keep up. So I think that's a factor. And I think the other thing we always are cognizant of is not so much the media in general, but the trade media. Are they going to look at this and say, "What are you doing? What is?" Like, and that's because we build those relationships. Yeah. Then when you have those conversations, now you've started off almost on the defense of like, "Look, it was a thing. We did it. It feels like you cheated on them." So I think those are interesting elements that because it really can hurt the credibility of the brand. But it's been interesting to be a part of that, and we're seeing more and more of those. Bushwick will be part of Taco Bell's program next year. So
really?
They was announced earlier this year when the Taco Bell did their big unveil. So that'll be exciting for them. So there's ways that they're as they ratchet up that we're able to capitalize on that from a PR standpoint, and back to the point of they can put in that time, effort, and energy to make sure these will be solid partnerships.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Let's talk Pickle Juice. You used PR to attract investment. How?
I think it's interesting because Pickle Juice is one of those brands, again, that created a category. So much like Kavita and et cetera, we've worked on. And it's the thing we always fight against. It's not pickle brine. It's a scientific formula. It's the neurological response that people have when they get cramps. And so this really combats that. And you drink it right away. It gets into your system and it helps to defeat it. And the interesting thing is we're their only external spend. They don't do any, they have no other agencies.
Wow.
They don't endorse any athletes that way. They're very much about product first. And we're here to help the storytelling and build that up. And again, talk to the executives, have them tell the story, be able to explain it. Because the first thing a reporter says, "Oh, I love pickle juice. When I get the pickles and I drink the brine," and then we have to stop right away and say, that's not what we are. It's a scientific formulation. It has the taste and flavor of it. And that's where, obviously the name came from. But it's a way that we're able to tell that story. And the great thing is, because it's used at the professional level in so many layers and levels, be it Australian rugby, all the U.S. Open, Wimbledon, and it's the iconic little bottle with the yellow cap. The NFL, there's the famous Eagles-Cowboys playoff game that was the Pickle Bowl, because it was the pickle juice helped the Eagles to win the game. So you have these factors that have come across. But what we've done is really ratchet that up, because in the past it was just, it happened. We've made sure that there's highlights around it. There was a Texas Rangers pitcher this year that had the pickle juice game, they've called it. And there's great stats. His stats before he had the pickle juice, his stats after, now he's taken off. And now I think he's made the All-Star team. I got to double check that, but it's that confidence that he has now. There's a couple Dodger players that use pickle juice. And now they're starting to put it in the dugouts. You'll see like the lineup of the pickle juice, because again, we look at the climate. It's hotter. Mm-hmm. You're out there. The athletes performing at 5-10 degree hotter temperatures. They're cramping more, and this is a way to really combat that. And part of that now is we're going after different influencers in the construction, in the home building, all the outdoor type elements where it helps, because they're out there. Yes, they're being hydrated, but it's a way to talk about it in a broader sense, that it's not just for extreme athletes or all athletes or just cyclists or whatever. You're able to tell that broader story. And obviously at night, if you get that leg cramp in your calf as you're sleeping, down the pickle juice, it'll go away. So there's ways that it becomes more of a all-inclusive brand, and it doesn't feel like it's just for the the elite.
Sounds like this is what sports drinks used to be like before they became just mostly sugar. This reminds me of, so believe it or not, I did roofing when I was in junior high, and I can remember getting up on a roof,
Yeah.
6 in the morning, we'd be there till 10 at night. And if I didn't have like a banana or something to kind of have some of those other things, I can remember just like cramping up and it's like your arm is stuck and you're like, I
Yeah.
can't bend my arm right now.
It's
Hold on
totally,
one second.
yes. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And it's, I had a cramp, man, maybe about 5 months ago. Same thing. You hobbled to the kitchen, got out the pickle juice, and it instantly just loosens up and goes
Hmm.
away. It's that sort of a miracle type drink.
That's incredible. Did you do anything different though? Because I mean, this led towards an investment. Was there something different about the strategy? It was like, great, that's part of your goals to get investment. Is
Yeah,
there?
I would say the biggest difference when we look at it for other brands is part one was the education campaign and combating the brine versus what pickle juice is. So that
Sure.
took a really, and that's become more and more prevalent. And again, if someone writes an article and says, I love brine and this helped my cramps, we send them an article or send them a letter that is educating them in that way. And we've had numerous media that have said, "Hey, I didn't know that. Let me try it. Let me try it. Let me," and they sort of re-educate them, and then you get that
Mm,
second article that says, "Hey, this is what it really is." I think that's a big factor, and I think the other thing is back to liquid on the lips. Getting organizing this review program, so we have reporters that are getting product on a regular basis. We know that the teams they probably have, I think, a third of the NFL gets their product and pays for it. This isn't, they don't donate the product. This is all paid for, pallets of product. And then we highlight that in those local markets. Hey, the Buffalo Bills have, pickle juice now as part of their army. We make sure that
mm,
all the broadcast teams, they've gotten all the information around it because it happens during the game, and you'll
sure.
hear them say, "Hey, get that guy pickle juice." Like it's becoming such a
Yeah.
it feels like the Baba Booey for a while when that would get yelled out for Howard Stern, where it's pickle juice has become known in that aspect. And when we get
Uh-huh.
those clips, like the Australian rugby for a long time was the only place that it was really would be every game you'd see the bottle, and we would share those clips here in the U.S. But now you're seeing it more and more. Yeah, in tennis is like our prime. We follow the tour from the French to Wimbledon, Cincinnati, that down to the U.S. Open because the heat on those courts is insane. And the Australian Open sort of starts it because it's their summer when it's our winter, but they have
Sure.
crazy temperatures, and we're able to tell that story because a lot they can't. They're not sponsoring these athletes, and a lot of the athletes do have, to your point, the Powerades, the Gatorades, as their sponsors. So they have to like sneak it, and it looks like they're vaping it the way they drink it. It's this like hidden thing, but it's a big aspect of being able to share that, and people get excited about it. Back to the beverage media, they've enjoyed that journey and be able to see it, become that bigger product.
You talked about the clips and being able to use those. What's
Mhm.
the unwritten rules that we need to know about as far as using some of the things that have occurred in media about your brand? And I'm going to start it with a story. There was a brand that we worked with, sold coats, really, really nice coats. And whenever Meghan Markle would wear their coats, their sales would just absolutely skyrocket.
Sure.
J Lo didn't hardly move a thing, right? Like other celebrities, but Meghan
Yeah.
Markle did, and it would just take off like insane. But they were already, for obvious reasons, hesitant about really ever using that in
Mhm.
any way. And so it did take off from a PR standpoint, but they didn't really reuse this content. Are there ways in which you say it's safe to reuse these types of clips, like, a celebrity drinking pickle juice or something and, turning it into something for your own social media? Or is it like, no, don't do that. It's tacky. You will end up losing, faith in this community.
I think there's a couple of things. I think one is you're seeing more and more these clips and even stills used in social
Hmm.
media because it's still the wild, wild west, and it's a post happens or a story, and it's gone the next day. So and I think that's where you're able to sort of on some level use it to your advantage. And I think a lot of times that because of the shrinking traditional media, they're not as litigious of going after people for using these
Sure.
clips. That it's okay in that world. And the other thing we're seeing is, there is, to your point, what's the gray area on people's websites? It's a lot more friendly to say as seen in and have like the
Hmm.
logos. That's places where the publications aren't as upset. But if you print like the whole article and it looks like it's on your site,
Sure.
you'll get those letters of take it down or cease and desist type stuff. So it's that fine line. But I think social is really where those things can live and can help to tell that story and be something that you can go back to. And again, every time that Rangers pitcher pitches now, there's a story that comes. Hey, remember the pickle juice game? Hey, here's his stats,
Hmm.
his ways, and some that the Rangers are doing as well, which is awesome. It's a way that you see this become a thing, and I think that's that sort of unwritten rule of what's the ways to use coverage.
Yeah. It's a dance, right? And you just got to figure out how to dance with the right partner. What about Easton Sports? I understand there's a good barnstorming story here, which reminds me of
Yes.
the old Atari game. But tell me a little bit about barnstorming with Easton Sports.
So I'll start the story with, Easton Hockey is no longer with us anymore. So it is, it was a sad time when that went, it was acquired and sort of dissolved. But the Easton, company had the two-piece sticks in the 1990s. Gretzky used, it was the famous aluminum stick and, shined on the ice. In early 2000, they came out with the Synergy, which is a one-piece stick, Kevlar and composites, and really was the whole change of the game from that point on. Now, every stick is in that composite factory. Parents are pissed because, when the stick breaks, you've spent, $150, $200, $500, and little Johnny, broke it already. But what we did to launch it was go to, fish where the fish are. So we did go through all the provinces, all the main hockey markets, and took the whole Easton team there. And we're able to go on many of the morning shows, meet with the beat reporters, because it was so foreign. You're introducing this whole new thing. Think of it like this year with the when the Yankees had the bats, the new bats that came out, and in baseball. So you have these aspects where if it's a difference, it becomes that becomes the focus. So we went all throughout. Again, coldest time of the year, bad flights, all those aspects. But you're able to get on, a lot of the hyper local, which were going to be the buyers. So all the Canadian retailers loved it. But they're getting on the CBC, getting on Hockey Night in Canada to be able to talk about the sticks. And then the founder was from Atlanta. So be able to take him to Atlanta and get him on CNN and talk about it in a way that, there's a kid from Atlanta that invented a hockey stick that changed the game. So being able to bring those things to life. And then getting on, my favorite was the stick itself would be on the front cover of the sports page. And they would talk about it in a way that it was, because it was doing so much. And you had the pro and the con. The old school one, we should have wood sticks, which haven't been used in 20 years. But also goalie equipment had to change because the shots were coming off faster, the release points. And as the hockey players were getting bigger on the rinks, that didn't change. The angles were different, and the ways the stick, you could do better shots, different aspects. So whole different, element. And then subsequently, we launched their next composite products at the Vancouver Olympics. So same thing, but on an international scale. So we hosted events all throughout Vancouver for media to see it, try it. The name had been known for a while, obviously from the stick, but they were able to see other equipment that was using that composite and Kevlar technology.
Is there a point where, a novel product like that, the PR opportunities start to dwindle, and then you have to have something new? Like, how do brands start to recognize, or how do you let them know when it's like, hey, we need something different to go in? And or is it like, hey, now let's switch it to founder stories? Or is there, like, what does that cycle look like?
Well, the funny thing is the kiss of death of any PR agency, if you go, hey, you haven't done anything new, we can't get you any stories. So we really try and ensure, to your point, we try and ride that wave and come back with different strategies and different plans before you hit that point. The other thing that we ended up doing, and if we're using that as the story, we took media to the factory. That's always a good one. And the factory wasn't easy to get to. It was in Tijuana, Mexico, over the border. It's like this composite alley where golf clubs are made and all the different composite products. But offering that up was a really big, sort of that second bite of the apple, because everyone saw it. It's been endorsed and enhanced through the NHL, and then be able to have people experience it, see how it's made, see how the elements are. And then, obviously the kicker at the end, we've put their name on the stick and they get to leave and have their own stick with their name on it. So those are aspects. And then also looking at it to the point of stats, we were able to, through the playoffs every year, be able to say, okay, there's, 52 of the players have Easton synergies. Here's their scoring numbers. Here's why Easton's running the playoffs, because they were always, leading that way. So looking at it from the advantages. And then when they released the next round of products, skates and protective equipment, like helmets, so you're able to utilize the trust you had earned about the composite product to say, look, this is why these are better, safer. Easton was part of a larger holding company that they had a helmet division, so you had all the safety around that, and obviously the bats, understanding composites. So yeah, it was a way to bring that all to life. And then the other thing would be going in back to the data, surveying the different associations, because there did start to become the pushback of like, hey, these are expensive sticks, we can't do this. But then when you do the math, the amount of wooden sticks kids were going through a season was equal to one of those sticks, and you were able to say, okay, from the time and effort standpoint, this is helping your kid's game. So yeah, it's a way to have that and tell that story in a way that made it interesting.
I love that. What about one more brand study, and then I want to dig into some other things here too. Kavita, the thing that I like about this is you were with them from startup until acquisition, and so you saw all of it. Was there an inflection point where you were like, yeah, this thing's going to take off?
I think pretty quickly as you started to see it get adapted, and we always push back on them to really go into that space with the yoga community, all the really honest people with the way, in that area. And I think, they were looking at it of, is that just a trend? Is that a thing? But yoga is, part of it now. It's really where you look at it of how that became that lifestyle and that they were there as well. And the authenticity of their beverage. Again, the sparkling probiotic, they had all the right strains, they had all the right flavor profiles. It had a whole story that, you were supposed to swirl it and actually, keep it cold at a certain level. Sure. And then throughout the campaign, where I think to your point, the inflection point, there was the great kombucha scandal in the, I'll say the mid, say like 2012, 2013s, when, and I don't know if you know this story at all.
I don't know it.
Okay, so at different retailers, when things are in the cold aisle, to get a beverage, the beverage or the temperatures were dropping. So what was happening with the kombuchas is they were fermenting. So all these kids were basically getting drunk every day. They were having hangovers. All these, the teenage girls going to the store before school, they were drinking fermented kombucha. And it wasn't just like in one area. This was happening nationwide. Wow. And so there were a lot of the brands that had to be pulled for a while because at first they thought it was the brand formulations, but they come to find out that it was at the retail level that they weren't keeping it cold enough. So that gave Kavita the opportunity because they were a different formulation, different aspect, and then we were able to jump on that and tell that story. And then at the same time, then they were able to get better distribution, better placements in a lot of these stores, etc. So it was an interesting time to be a part of that and really look at it. And it was, I think it was either a congressman or someone at a political level that it was his kid that they found out that she was getting drunk from kombucha every day. So that was the aspect that really changed, I think, the brand trajectory. But then you started to see more investment, more expansion, more retailers. It became less a trend and more of an actual thing. It was also, if you look in the mid 2010s, the aughts there of probiotics as a whole. Probiotics became a whole aspect. We did a big survey with the dietitians and doctors to find out, which is more important, your multivitamin every day or probiotic. And overwhelmingly, it was about probiotics. It was about gut health. Wow. It was a mind-gut connection. It was a way to really ride that as well. So you had this probiotic storyline that's going, and it's still going now. I mean, now it's in pet world and all those things. But I think that's an element that really was the fact that they were the leader in a probiotic beverage. And now you see it with, obviously sodas and all the other aspects. But that was a big part of it.
Gut microbiome is taking off. I've actually used Viome, which is a company that helps to analyze it a little bit. I think it's very interesting, to look at the science behind the bacteria essentially that are living inside your gut and how that impacts a lot of aspects of your health. You talked about politicians, though, how there's a politician. Is that ever a part of the play, like an intentional part of the play where you're like, hey, you know what, let's work with these lobbyists or something like that?
So I'll say yes and no. There's times that it is important. In our parent company is a public affairs firm, so they do a lot more of that work. But in the back to Easton, the exit speeds of bats had to change. In 1998, the College World Series game, USC and Arizona State, the final game was 21-20. It was so many home runs and dingers, and the balls are flying off. Now the bats, the exit speed is the associations limit the speeds, not the manufacturers. And so there was this whole campaign that Congress was trying to, or one congressman was trying to change it, ban all bats that were non-wood and go back to wood bats. And so we created a whole campaign of don't take my bat away. We had different mom groups, different aspects and lobbyists that obviously went to Capitol Hill and different state capitals to be able to do that. Got Little League Baseball behind it, got all the other associations, because the sports would die off because the wood bats would, the interest, the excitement would die off, and then also just you couldn't keep up with the amount of bats you would need. So being able to tell that story, at the end of the day, the associations changed the exit speeds. We're able to make it more where you're not having these crazy trampoline effect off of bats. Sure. But it was being able to have combating any of the congressional elements with lobby groups and be able to tell that story and get, because if a manufacturer just raised their hand and said, hey, this isn't fair, then it would be like, capitalism gone bad. But this was a way to really show and create that impact.
I think it's wild sometimes the things that we think need to be legislated versus not. I remember a story along these lines, which was, I think it was in the UK. They tried to regulate or legislate the number pi. They basically were like, yeah, we don't want it to be 3.14159265358 blah, 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 blah. We don't want it to be that. We're going to call it 3.2. And it was like, wait, how did we come up with this? And like mathematicians basically had to go and lobby against the government and say, you can't actually legislate a number. That's not a thing. Let's not do that.
That's great. I've never heard that. I'm going to have to look that up. That's funny.
So what stage is too early for dedicated budget for PR, or is there such a thing? Again, you started with Kavita from the very beginning, but like, when is it where brands are like, you know what, you maybe need to do a couple of other things before you really start working with PR?
I think when we meet with the brands, when we start, with a prospect or if someone comes to us and we try and, really go through that, what is your goals, if it's acquisition, and again, in those early stages, they may not have those goals yet. Sure. They're just looking to get product made and get into retail. I think when we can tell, there's you sort of have that spider sense of it might be too early. When we try and educate them and really counsel them of like, hey, let's talk in a month. We'll put a plan together. We can tell you what we're going to do, but you might not be ready for this yet. Back to the point of, do you have product? Do you have distribution? Do you have, will the website, is the switch going to be turned on? And that really helps to garner it. On other sides, they might say, no, we want to get hired now because we want your counsel. We want to make sure we're doing this along the way. And there's just different ways of scale that we can work on it in that regard to make sure they're having those aspects, because the last thing we want to do is come on the clock and we're doing our stuff, and then, there's another delay. We're not going to launch till next month. Oh, wait, it's 6 weeks from now. Oh, wait, it's 2 months, because we're on the clock, and then we can't talk to media, and there's only so much of the background elements you can do, and only so much of the research to keep up with, trying to maintain that. But we just try and be honest with it and say, hey, let's take the time out. It's too early. Let's talk in a month. Let's do that, because otherwise it does become this thing, and then there's the pressure on both sides, because we're calling we have our weekly call or biweekly. You have any updates? No. Okay, well, here's our 5 questions. Here's what we want to do. That's great, but we're not ready yet. So it is an interesting dynamic. But I think there's still in that dance, there's still interesting conversations, because as they're guiding and having things come to light, it's a way that we can also influence the way the launch can happen, the way the brand can start. So yeah, it's an interesting play, when we start with the brands that are, baby brands, if you will.
One of the things that a lot of D2C brands are doing when they're going from 10 million to 100 million is they're maybe going from just pure D2C to starting to get into retail spaces. Mm-hmm. And there's ways that we support them on an advertising perspective. And one of the ways we support them is we like to set up a lot of times geo holdout tests where we say, great, what are the 2,000 locations you're going to be in? These 1,500 or so, we're going to have some dedicated ads going towards those areas and not the other ones. So we can actually see what's the impact in the actual sell through there within those retail locations. What are ways that PR can and should be used to help when people are starting to go from pure D2C to actually getting into retail spaces?
So I think a good example is with Bushwick. So Bushwick is in certain Walmart stores. And they have, for their spicy syrup line, and they have a pancake line. So what we did was, on the influencer side, have influencers go in and shop the store and be able to call it out, pull it out. Hey, I know this brand. Wait, they're in retail now. All that story.
Oh, I like that.
And bring it to life, and then carry it through and go home and make the pancakes and use the syrup. But it's a way to cross that divide, because yes, they've been known as online influencers, etc. Yes, in the trades, we'll tell the story, because that's a big win of when D2C does cross into that world. But it's a way to bring the influencers into a way that they're telling that story in an authentic way, and that they've been connected to the brand in the past. They've used the brand, have done stories around the honey, the sriracha, etc. And now we're in retail. So be able to bring that to life.
Mm-hmm. I want to go into your mindset as a leader, because I think there's some interesting things that translate to any leader at any business. You've been recognized, Blaze specifically has been recognized as the best places to work. What's the secret to creating that kind of a culture?
I think it's interesting. I look at it, it's a big thing. I think, my parents were teachers. So it's that sort of, and my dad was a 3rd grade teacher. So you have that mentality. And every year when they started school, how do you get your classroom on your side, if you will? So I think that's an element that I always look at when we have our team and really building that type of culture. I think also, with a lot of the elements, especially now when it's hybrid, you don't have the same camaraderie, the same, whatever it is, water cooler chatter. but trying to create those moments in a way that's authentic. It doesn't have to feel that it's forced, forced family fun as we hear
Sure.
thrown around. I think there's elements of really also respecting everyone's time, and not everyone wants to be, at the center of attention or be telling stories or, tell me about your weekend. It's understanding the people that way. So it's the interpersonal aspects, and we treat our office. We did the whole sort of hotel model, first come, first serve. If you get here, and again, everyone gravitates to where they usually sit. But there's some days, hey, I want to sit in the conference room, or hey, I want to sit, next to her because we're doing a project. So there's aspects of that where you're you're turning over a little bit of that sort of office control. But I think that stuff really goes a long way. And then I think I'm always sensitive to it of, you can't pick your clients, but you get to work on some really cool clients, projects, brands.
Yeah.
And I think that lends to that culture as well. And again, the aspects of being able to travel, being able to be, well compensated, all those aspects I think are an important factor. And there's some people that are like, hey, I don't like to travel. I don't want to fly. I don't want to do stuff. Okay, so that those things. And if you have those conversations early enough, it's not the awkward, well, if the client's like, hey, Dave, I can't wait for you to be at this event. Well, Dave can't travel because they just had a baby, or things that like that. So it's trying to understand those factors. And then I think the other thing is, I think we look at, especially on the hybrid side now, the work from home, there's still got to be some balance. It's yes, you're working from home, but that's not necessarily 9 to 5 anymore. It might be, 6 to noon, and then it might be, 2 to 10.
Right.
And being understand, and we communicate that. My thing, and I know my EVPs have said, just tell me what's going on. Like the more you communicate with me, hey, I was going to go and my friends are doing a fun run. Can I go? I'm going to leave at 4. Fine,
Yep.
the hours are there because I know, when you get home and from 8 to 10, you're probably going to catch up on stuff. And I think that that's something we look at of just trying to be more real and more honest in the reality of today's world. Because otherwise, if you're stuck to, hey, 9 to 5, I need you, 8:52, you better be on. And I think that's where you lose people.
I completely agree with you. My philosophy is that I want to give the team as much autonomy as I can over their own life. I think that we want to have some control over our life, and we want to have some influence over that direction that's going to go. That involves, I would say, our time, I think, is a big part, kind of like you said, where it's like, if you need to go do this or you're picking a kid up or whatever, it's like, yeah, done. You want to go do, like you said, a run. You're like, hey, there's this 5K that I want to be involved in. It takes place. No big deal. Like we work around those things, and that's just a part of it. And then, let's just say like some control over financial as well, right? And so it's like we have unlimited like bonuses for people where it's like based on how much revenue they're managing, they have the opportunity to generate an unlimited amount. There's no cap to that. And I think the benefit to that is it's like it gives you some control over what you're going to make. Can you bring on more clients? Can you grow those clients, right? Like that ends up being incentivized for you to do the thing that the client wants as well. And so I love hearing you say that.
And I'd say on the flip side, there are some employees or associates that they want the control. They need to have, that much more of
100%.
that. And
Yes.
they like that. And that's otherwise, it's not the inmates running the asylum, but yeah, it's just pushing the right buttons in many ways. And yeah, it's funny to see how, again, we all get managed.
Yeah. I want to dig into the personal side of who is Matt Kovacs as well. I like getting to know the human. You hinted at this a little bit, but you have, you're a remote culture, but you have some experience in remote culture from your, I believe, high school days.
Yes.
You got an early jump on this. What happened?
So played baseball, all throughout, and then I tore both knees up. And back in the days, in the mid 80s, it wasn't like it is now where they operate and you're back to normal, the next day. I was that kid that, missed probably like 3-4 months of school every year from like 9, 10, 11 grades. So it really was just homeschooled in a way. And it was like the new kid every year. You still had your core group of friends you grew up with, and they would stop by and everything, but it wasn't the same experience. And that's something that, again, now to your point, it's invaluable because you can be self-starter and understand it and, know that there's, other elements. But yeah, that was an interesting time of, some teachers went to school with my parents. So again, back to the teacher mafia there. So they'd be like, read this book and then write a report and that'll be your grade for this, semester versus other stuff. And otherwise, trying to learn Spanish remotely was not that easy. So you had, the teachers would come to your house, etc. But yeah, it was an interesting time. And I think that's part of, again, probably a lot of my personality today.
Yeah, and for those listening who are like, "What do you mean you can't learn Spanish remotely?" This is back before you and I grew up. Back before you had like YouTube teaching you these things, or Duolingo, or any of these other things.
Yeah, exactly.
You're reading it in a book. You're like, I don't know if I pronounced that right. I think I rented out every book that our library had on Japanese because I wanted to learn Japanese when I was in like third or fourth grade. And it's like, I have no clue if I'm pronouncing these right or wrong, right? You're just trying to read them phonetically the best you can.
That's awesome.
So you had parents who were teachers. My mom was a teacher. What's one of the like best things that you had as a result of having parents who were teachers?
I think what's interesting too is the the way that, again, obviously my schooling was different in those years,
Sure.
but the reverence that students had for like them, they'd see them in public, and it was like, and I see it in my child. Oh wow, that's my teacher, and they watch like what you're doing in that aspect. So it's that interactions of, when they see the teachers in the real world, which was always funny. And I think the elements of just understanding the value of schooling and teaching, and the way probably the way I was raised, but also the way that they were raising these kids every year. Third grade's an important year, so my dad had that
Sure.
for probably 20 years. My mom taught high school English, so that was a whole different element in her world. But I think it's something to understand, and again, being able to understand what teachers go through today. It's crazy. My parents have been retired for probably about 25 years now, so it's totally different. It was a different world, different schools, etc.
Completely different. Yeah,
Yeah,
my mom tells me stories from early before she retired, and then what it was like towards the end of retiring. It's very, very different
yeah,
environment.
yeah.
Do you have any quotes that you live by?
Yes, and I'll be cliche because I'm from Pittsburgh, but it's the standard is the standard. Mike
Love it.
Tomlin's famous quote, but I think it's something that it applies in many ways. I think it doesn't have to feel that it's this oppressive sort of quote that people do, but again, it's trying to set standards on every level, be it for again the culture, for our clients, for ourselves, and I think it's an important factor that we look at because it's the ways that we can help not only grow the agency but grow ourselves, grow your positioning, and be able to understand that the purpose, and also I think clients can feel that if they feel that you're driven that way. I think that's an important element as well.
I love that. I do. I appreciate standards. I think that without standards, it makes it very hard to have ambiguous goals to actually accomplish something, right? Without there being like a standard that you're actually aiming for. Um, you have two dogs. I've got three dogs. Having dogs is crazy. Tell me a little bit about your dogs, though.
So I have a French bulldog named
Yeah.
Truffle, and she's 9. And then
Truffle. Wait a minute. But how do you get a name for Truffle for a dog?
so my daughter named her. She's the color
Okay.
of like the chocolate truffles. So yeah, that's how
Oh, nice. I like that.
I call her Truff. So you have to give it a little bit of testosterone, and then
Yeah.
Chuck is our English bulldog, and Chuck is like the hit of every client knows about Chuck. Everyone loves Chuck because he's just a big dopey bulldog, and he's just hilarious. Just his expressions, his tongue, everything he does. It's everything you'd think of an English bulldog. So and the two of them together, because he's 55 pounds and she's like 20 pounds, and they're
Sure.
just it's like Mutt and Jeff. They just run around together. But yeah, that's a big part of our house.
I love that they all have their own personality from the get-go, right? Like there is just who they are. We have, like I said, three dogs, and each one of them are completely different.
Yeah.
The oldest one, so we've got Okie Dokie, Ollie Ollie Oxenfree, and Oopsie Daisy. So they're all O's. But Oakley is she's the oldest. She's definitely the most mature, but she's reached that stage where she's like an old lady kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's Ollie, who's the most needy you could possibly imagine. If you go anywhere without him, he's like, "Can I just please ride in the car with you?"
Yeah.
And then there's Oopsie, who really lives up to her name, and she's just like, "What are you doing? Like, I think you only have half a brain. Like, I don't know if you're actually thinking through what you're doing here."
And how they just follow you throughout the day, especially if you're working
Sure.
from home. Different rooms, they have to get up and go with you. And
Yeah.
then if you happen to walk in the kitchen, it's over because they think they're getting fed. So it's a fun just dynamic, and it's every day. It's the same thing every day, but that's why we love them.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to do something different. First time I'm doing this with you, it was a suggestion from Michael Caminetti. I want to give him a shout out because this is kind of a fun idea. But I want to do like a this or that, where you're going to basically rank things, and you're going to say which one is better, and we'll continue to go from there. So we're going to do tailgate foods, and you're going to rank which tailgate foods are the best. And if I miss one that you're like, dude, we got through all of this and you didn't give me the best one, let me know that too. Let's start with chili versus burgers.
think you got to go burgers. It's tailgate. You're standing up. The chili can be messy. Yeah.
Okay, burgers versus hot dogs.
I'll go burgers again. You got to get filled up. You're going to be, there's, obviously maybe some drinking happening. The burgers go.
Burgers versus brats.
I'll go brats.
Ooh, why? Why the switch?
Brats has the storytelling. You can, bring it to life. It's a regional fare. Yeah.
Okay, brats versus pulled pork sandwiches.
Again, I'm going to go brats. I'm not a big messy guy. I feel like that I would be the guy that I'm going to be wearing this all day on my day. Yeah.
Sure. Brats versus buffalo chicken wings.
I'll go brats. Once again, wings. Yeah, it's sauce, hands, all that.
This is probably true for this one then too. Brats versus nachos.
See, I'll go nachos. See, I think nachos, I've perfected. I can understand nachos, and I think that can be, every bite can be a fun adventure.
This one's a stretch. I don't know how it ended up on the list, but I wanted to keep it because I thought it was interesting. Brats, or no, wait, you said nachos. Nachos versus deviled eggs.
Ooh, I'd go deviled eggs.
Right? Like, I don't know if that's a tailgate as much, but it was on there, and I'm like, I kind of like deviled eggs, though.
Yeah, because you know why deviled eggs? Because they're like a delicacy. You don't get them all the time. At a restaurant, you see it, you're like, I'm going to get that. Yeah, I think the deviled eggs would win out.
You see the meme where somebody basically, they're like, hey, do you want like 12 hard-boiled eggs? And it's like, no, thanks. They're like, what if I like take the yolk out, mix it up, and put it back inside of the egg or whatever? And you're like, you son of a gun, I'm in, kind of thing.
Sold, exactly.
Okay, deviled eggs versus mac and cheese.
Deviled eggs. Yeah.
Deviled eggs versus potato skins.
I'll go deviled eggs still. Yeah.
Deviled eggs versus chip and guac.
I go chip and guac.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. Chips and guac versus like those barbecued meatballs.
Barbecue meatballs. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something more protein, sustenance about them, right?
Yes, protein, and you're like, yes, I can have about 100 of these. It'll be good.
Barbecued meatballs or the sweet chili meatballs?
Still barbecue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barbecued meatballs or like the pizza that you just ordered in from like, whatever.
I think pizza would be a good one. Yeah.
What toppings are you getting on your pizza?
I think that one, because again, it's tailgate. You probably got to go more just pepperoni or cheese.
Sure.
You can't get too adventurous because there's too big of a mob to cancel it out.
That's fair. Pizza or soft pretzels with beer cheese?
I'd go the soft pretzels.
Okay. Soft pretzels or brownies?
Soft pretzels.
Soft pretzels. Is there any that I missed?
Well, you could go on the Pittsburgh side. You got to bring in some of the different ethnic foods. So you could have stuffed cabbage.
Okay.
You could have so the stuffed cabbage would be one that would go over the meatballs because that'd be fun to have.
Sure.
When I go back to town, you could do a Permane Brothers sandwich, which is
I don't even know what that is. Wait, what?
Permane Brothers is a famous sandwich place in Pittsburgh.
Oh.
Basically, it's you get 2 pieces of bread. They'll do the meat, the cheese, coleslaw, and then the French fries on the sandwich, and then they smash it down. So it's all in one sandwich. So the Permane Brothers would be a lot, and that's good for tailgating. They sell them like in halves and all that stuff.
Yeah, I should have done more research on Pittsburgh. I missed out on that.
Yes. So those would be some other ones to add in. Yeah.
Okay, so what's top now?
Well, all right. So we went I'd go the stuffed cat. Well, Permane Brothers, if that was our last one.
Permane Brothers is number one.
Yeah. But I think those are from a tailgating at a Steeler game, you hit all the right ones. I mean, I've had probably all that stuff through the years. Yeah.
What's pathetic here is I grew up not far from Pittsburgh. I grew up in Canton, Ohio. Yeah. I had not heard of a Permane Brothers sandwich, so I'm a little bummed that now I got to have one.
You got to have one. It's in the airport now, which is great.
Okay.
They're a franchise. Obviously, a venture capital firm bought them. They're franchised. They go as far west as Indianapolis, and then they're in Florida. They're all out because all the Yinzers Carolinas, anywhere that Pittsburghers have migrated, that's where they've shown up.
All right, I'm going to have to grab some. I'm going to have to either get back to Pittsburgh here at some point in time, or I'm just going to have to grab some.
Gold Belly does it. You could have it shipped to you.
Ooh.
I had a client that sent for my birthday, sent me a whole Gold Belly. It was a 4-pack of sandwiches.
That actually sounds really interesting. Okay, That's a good place to end because now I'm hungry. Matt, I just want to say thank you for coming on, sharing your time, your wisdom with us. If people want to work with you or follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think, again, obviously blazepr.com or you go to my LinkedIn is always 2 good ways to connect.
Cool. Again, thank you for sharing your time today, and thank you everyone for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Up Arrow podcast with William Harris. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.